Welcome to The Author Show, where we present new authors and books. From fiction to self-help and everything in between, you'll find it all here. To watch the TV version of our program, visit authorswebtv.com. That's authorswebtv.com. And now, let the show begin.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming the program author MarthaDusage, and Martha is the author of Why Bother? Because Self-Help is Never Stupid. Martha's a writer, speaker, teacher, facilitator, and the best-selling author, of course, of Why Bother? Because Self-Help is Never Stupid. Martha has stepped through the looking glass of dysfunction and sexual abuse to discover what we can all discover, an end to suffering. Over 20 years of practicing heart-centered consciousness has helped her aid others in seeing their situations in a new light. Martha, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Don.
Well, let's start with a big question. Tell us about this book, please.
Well, this book is a self-help book, and it's mainly about using conscious awareness and full-body integration with practical applications and exercises to help others overcome abuse.
Now, who did you write this book for specifically?
I wrote this book for people who have survived abuse of any kind, mainly for those who have suffered from sexual abuse and any type of trauma from that.
Now, would you say there's any type of central message or perhaps underlying theme that you could say runs throughout your book?
It's about breaking through the underlying disturbances that remain caused by abuse. Abuse is a very, very deeply rooted issue. And because of that, it sticks around for a really long time. It takes years. It takes years for people to overcome and really heal on a deep level from abuse. When you've suffered from abuse, things are triggered and they start to keep coming back up. And it's through the idea of full body conscious awareness that we can start to let some of those things dissolve.
If you had to choose, what would you say is the single most important idea you're sharing in your book that's really going to add value to the reader's life?
Well, Don, we're all seeking the same things: peace, freedom, fulfillment, love, and joy. And along with that, for victims and survivors of abuse and trauma, it's very difficult for them to find their voice. And what I'd like to help others with is finding that voice and having confidence in that voice. It's about empowerment and stepping into what I call now being an enchanted champion. I'd be happy to share more about that with you if you like.
Now, if you could compare your book with any book out there we might already be familiar with, which book would it be and why?
Well, the book that influenced me the most was Carolyn Mace's book called Why People Don't Heal and How They Can. She goes into a very, very deep spiritual level about how we make contracts before we come into this world. And it's about that we choose lessons before we come here. And that's a very difficult thing for many abuse survivors to accept. And once you really dive into accepting that, it can be very life-changing and life-altering about the way that you perceive things, the way that you look at things, and the way that you start to take your healing into your own hands.
What inspired you to write your book?
What inspired me most is discovering that over 24% of the population claims to have been sexually abused before the age of 18. If you take that and you look at all the other types of abuse that go on in the world besides sexual abuse, the physical, the verbal, emotional, psychological, on, elder abuse, religious abuse, substance abuse, when you look at that, that's a really big part of the population. And knowing that that's such a big part of the population, to me, it seems that abuse could very well be our number one problem on a planetary level. I actually listened to a radio interview the other day with Bernie Siegel, who did a lot of work with Carolyn Mace. And I was really taken aback when I heard Bernie Siegel say that on the other side of love is not hate, but on the other side of love is indifference and abuse. And I was like, wait. What Bernie Siegel said was on the other side of love was abuse. And I was really impressed to hear that because I haven't heard too many people of his stature out there talking about that.
So what prompted you to seek change?
My entire life, I had this low-level disturbance that kind of let me know that I was really not on the right path. I kind of grew up in a dysfunctional household, and when you grow up in a dysfunctional environment, having been sexually abused myself and keeping it silent, which most children, adolescents, anybody who has been sexually abused, because it's so threatening and it's something that's unexpected and you don't know how to deal with adult issues, oftentimes there are threats made if you speak up. There's the full body terror of what could possibly happen if you do speak up. There's the guilt, there's shame, there's all kinds of things that happen. And again, knowing that there's such a large population that has suffered from abuse, the only way that we can transform and change this is by speaking up. And that's really what inspired me to seek change.
Who or what influenced your change the most?
There are two people that stepped into my life. Prior to my 30s, I didn't have a whole lot of support in empowering myself. I didn't even understand the idea of suppression. I didn't even understand that what happened to me as a child was abuse. So I had someone step into my life who really took me under her wing and showed me that what happened to me was abusive. I never trusted anyone. I didn't have trust, and that's a big issue for survivors of abuse. It's a challenge for people who have been abused to trust. And in my 30s, I had a woman who came into my life, and I trusted her enough for the first time to speak out about what happened. And then I have a mentor, a master teacher of spiritual consciousness, and his name is Keith Barnum. He's also a best-selling author and a teacher. And it was through Keith's teachings that I really started to open up, to drop down the walls, so to speak, to allow myself to start to heal.
Now, in the book, you say the number one creator of problems in our world is abuse. Why do you feel that way?
Well, again, because when you look at the statistics of sexual abuse being 24%, and then add in all the other types of abuse, like I had mentioned earlier, the physical, the verbal, domestic violence and religious abuse. When you take the 24% of sexual abuse and then you add in all the other abuses, that's hard to fathom that every one of us on this planet hasn't been affected in some way, shape, or form by abuse. And then there's abuse of power. And if you think about it, it's all abuse of power, because we're abusing our own power when we step into self-abuse of things to kind of ease the pain of abuse. So, oftentimes people who have been abused physically, emotionally, verbally become substance abusers because they're trying to ease that pain. So, we're abusing our own power in that way because we're not empowering ourselves. We're abusing ourselves.
What's your best advice regarding how people can get over abuse?
It's important to have support. It's important to seek support. And it's important to really embrace the full spectrum of what you experience. You can't just let something like this go. You have to really take it in. You have to embrace what happened. And it's really ideal. You can't just heal from one method. It's important to use different methods, to seek out the conventional methods of healing with counseling, and it's important to do some of the alternative work where as far as like hypnosis or neurolinguistic programming or things that like that, soul retrieval, rebirthing, things that can take you back to that first point where the abuse started, because often you don't even recognize where the abuse started, and you have to allow yourself to go back to those experiences and really look at it from the perspective of what is often referred to as being an observer. Because if you get too emotionally attached, if you're so emotionally ingrained in what happened, you can't look at it from any other perspective other than from the perspective of being a victim. And the way that you let go of being a victim is to step away from the personal side of what happened to you and look at it from the perspective of being an observer, so that you can look at the big picture. And then when you look at the big picture, then you can narrow down to the smaller components. And it's in taking both viewpoints, the large perspective and the narrowed down perspective, that you get a full perspective and it can embrace the full spectrum of you so that you can heal.
What has been your most rewarding experience since publishing this work?
The response that I'm getting from people, not just new people, it's really rewarding when you have someone who's read the book say that they have been, suffering for years and that the book has been very empowering for them. There are also people that have not been in my life for many, many years. For example, I have somebody who I hadn't seen or spoken to in over 35 years who read the book, took the book to a counselor, because she's in counseling for having post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, from the Gulf War. And knowing that she's taken the book to a professional counselor and is working through the book with a professional counselor, and that it has changed her life, and that she's saying that her children are seeing a difference in her from this book that I've written. That's rewarding because it's making a difference in people's lives. How can anything be more rewarding than being able to make a difference in someone's life?
Other than selling your book, of course, is there anything else you hope to accomplish with it?
Well, I'm creating a workshop that I'm launching next weekend, which it's an extension of the book, and the workshop is called the Heart Pillar. And what the Heart Pillar is, it's a process, it's an energetic process. It is a multi-sensory experience of using different techniques to things that I've learned over the years, journaling and sound and neurolinguistic programming. And I've taken a lot of different techniques that I've used over the years and incorporated them into this workshop. And the Heart Pillar, the pillar is the pillar of empowerment. And the heart naturally is heart-centered consciousness. But the process was actually given to me divinely as I was writing the book. I had this little voice come through that said, scrap this chapter. I was revising a chapter, and I kept hearing, scrap this chapter, scrap this chapter. We have something else for you. And not everybody buys into this, but that's okay. It was Archangel Gabriel and Raphael, and they gave me this process, and it was unbelievable how fast this chapter got written. The words just flew through my fingers without me thinking about them at all, which to me is just more evidence of how deeply I have stepped into conscious awareness, that I was able to allow these words to flow through. And when you read the chapter, it's a short chapter, but when you read the chapter, you can really feel the empowerment of the words, because we are not just a mind, we're not just a body, and we do place trauma in different parts of our body. And Deepak Chopra is a good one for talking about this, about how all our illnesses are a manifestation of our emotions. Deepak being the rock star of the spiritual world. And Carolyn Mace, too, she was a big influence on me in understanding, because she coined the term, your biography becomes your biology. And both of them discuss how when we take trauma and we place it in some part in our bodies. So I also incorporate a lot of that body awareness into this workshop.
In your opinion, who should buy this book?
Mainly those who have suffered from abuse and trauma, and or anybody who knows someone who has suffered from abuse or trauma. There's a lot of parents out there that have children who have suffered and desperately want to help them. I've spoken with people who have children that have suicidal tendencies from being abused, not through any fault of the parents. I mean, the parents didn't know, and now they have a child who's suffering desperately. And it would be helpful for them to understand what that child's going through so that they can communicate and have a better understanding and more compassion when they're dealing with somebody that they know and love that has suffered from abuse.
Time is getting very short, so the most important question, where can readers find you and your book?
I do have a website. It's MarthaDusage2015. My book is available on my website, along with the first accompanying workbook that I've created and produced is on my website. Both the book and the workbook are available on Amazon as well. And my contact information is all listed on the web. So as I'm creating more workshops and making them available to the public, they can check in on my website, where they can sign up for my mailing list and stay informed about the upcoming workshop times and dates.
Could you spell your name for us, please?
It's Martha, Martha, and the last name is Dusage. It's DU''Sage. Now, the website does not have the apostrophe. It's just MarthaDusage.com.
This has been just great. Our guest today has been Martha Dusage, and she is the author of Why Bother? Because Self-Help is Never Stupid. Martha, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Don.
This is Don McCauley wrapping up another edition of The Author Show. Please share this interview with your family and friends so that they too may have the opportunity to discover our guest and her work. And why not spread the word on social media? We look forward to you joining us next time for another great book and another great author on The Author Show.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. To contact us, call toll-free 1-877-955-8800. That's 877-55-8800. Or visit theauthorshow.com. Theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.